Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm excited to be here today to talk about the masculine in a different way or a different frame than we've talked about it before. And I can admit in this moment, there's this little bit of like nervousness of, is this going to be going too far for men? Is it going to be, something that once I say what we're going to talk about that men are going to be like, oh, interesting. So, I don't know a ton about when you guys are listening to this podcast. There's not a lot of like writing in and telling me what your experience is. So feel free to do that after this one, especially. And I'll now give you the headline of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the divine masculine and, the healthy masculine. And in a way, being able to integrate all of you, right? That a lot of times in our culture, a lot gets left behind, especially for men. And there's this idea of I have to be the rock, I have to be the strong one. I talk about that a lot. But how to actually, come through, especially in love relationships and in the rest of your life with what I would call and what our guest today would call the divine masculine. So welcome, Ilan Ferdman. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for being an old soul and someone who's on a path of growth and discovery.
Thank you so much for having me. I love that intro.
Oh, good. So, all right, we're going to talk about the divine masculine, and maybe we could break it down a little bit for men who aren't familiar with that term and it's, a little bit unpalatable or weird. What is it from your perspective?
Yeah, I'll just give you my perspective because I'm sure you can ask 100 different people and they'll give you 100 different ways that they perceive it. So for me, what I've learned is the divine masculine is the ability to hold both the masculine and the feminine in balance internally. And that can look like, it looks like very different than I guess what I thought. Because when someone first told me, experience the feminine, I was like, I don't want to be, I was like, no, thank you. But there is kind of like the two sides of every coin, right? Masculine, the masculine side of us is the creator, is the doer. It's the part that just makes things happen. It's things that, and again, this is separate from gender, right? Like there's plenty of women who are
embody lots of masculine.
That's it. Right? Like you look at all these powerhouse women in the workforce, they've had to embody masculine. Yes. Now there's also, I don't want to get into this too much, but there's distorted masculine, there's healthy masculine, there's distorted feminine, but leave that aside for now.
Yes, for now.
So masculinity is that, right? The creator energy. Feminine is the allowing. It's the receiving. And most men growing up, because we are traditionally raised in environments that in order to succeed or win or receive love and acceptance, we have to win. We have to make it happen. Yeah. And so from a very early age, we're programmed into that. And that's true for most humans, I think, today. Very few people.
The masculine is very a dominant way of being, in our culture.
Yeah.
For better or
So
for
there's a
worse.
lot of, I will fight to make it happen.
Uh-huh.
I will meddle. I will manipulate. I will do anything to get to that place, right? This very like singularly targeted result.
Yeah.
Where the feminine is a lot more, I can sit and I can relax and I can allow for
Right. I can
intuition,
receive. I can, all
insights.
of those. Yep.
There's an open-hearted awareness that comes with the feminine. And so now when you start to marry the two, right? What I've noticed in my experience is when you run around trying to produce results at all times, you're just like one of those horses with the blinders on. You will produce results. I'm not taking anything away from that. Like you will. And most of you that are listening probably have produced amazing results in your life.
Yep.
And what I learned is that while I can produce results that way, it is not the only way to produce results.
Right. It's not the only way. It's also not the most pleasurable way. And it's not the most sustainable way.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's been this process of having to relearn and reawaken this other aspect of us, because we're both born having both of them.
Yes.
But then we go through life and you start to dominate with one because this is the one that produces results. This is the one that gets you love, acceptance, awards, money, accolades, whatever it is, right? And so slowly this other one just atrophies and goes bye-bye.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until, and this is what I was sharing with you, like my first ayahuasca experience, because ayahuasca is a very feminine
right?
Spirit.
Feminine spirit, yep.
And I remember feeling it. And I was like, oh my God, this is so new. This is so different. And after having that experience, it became a mission of mine to reawaken this dormant aspect of me. And when the two marry, what I've found is instead of running around and just producing this and having to do that and da, 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 you start to step back. And instead of going forward and manipulating your world and environment all the time,
or trying to force it.
Yeah. You stop meddling.
Yeah.
And you allow this time to provide you with insights and information. And it somehow starts to come from this way deeper place of who you are. And then you act on that. Yeah. So it's like now I only act on inspired action. Ooh. Anything that the mind tells me is like, you got to go do this and you got to go do that and you got to go do this. I'm like, cool. And I'm just going to sit and I wait.
So like sounds like that has a little more of like a tense or frantic, or, it still might be what someone else might call inspired. Like, oh, I feel like passionate about this, but there's a different quality.
Yes. And if I can say it this way that hopefully people will understand, it's what the mind wants is simply a form of trying to make your outside world make your inside world feel okay. So basically something happens inside that does not feel comfortable. It might be sadness, it might be grief, it might be anger, it might be frustration. And the mind looks down at this and goes, this is not okay, fix this. And then you start running around doing all of these things to try to make this thing inside be okay. And you do it, it doesn't make it okay, it just numbs it or distracts you from it for a span of time. And then the thing reawakens again. And again and again. And you keep chasing success. You keep chasing love. You keep chasing the perfect body or whatever the thing that's uncomfortable inside
tells you, oh, if I just have this,
that's it.
I will feel better.
That's it. And I think everyone listening, you've played that game so long, like
you don't even recognize it's a game. It just seems like that's what life is.
Yeah, but like, I think we've all done that long enough where it's not healthy. Like, I don't know where, your listeners are at what age of their life, but like when people say midlife crisis, I just think it's like a soul reawakening moment.
Yes, it is.
The soul's been like, for decades, it's been like, you shouldn't do this. Yeah. You shouldn't do this. This is killing you.
Yes. And then it starts getting louder and
that's
louder
it.
and louder.
That's it. Yeah. And then eventually you're like, I can't keep doing this.
Yes. Can you tell us so as you've made that shift
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to back up for one moment. One thought I had while you were talking is like, if we didn't call it masculine and feminine, there wouldn't be such resistance. It would just be
Absolutely.
like, oh, right. There are these more receptive and more penetrative or generative parts of me. And right, there's a whole world of humanity.
Yeah.
So I'm curious though, as you've made this shift to integrate, what's different for you, right? What is life like? Give people a sense of what happens. Because I think in some way it's really hard to conceive of.
Yeah.
Like I can't take the time to wait and relax because things are going to fall apart, or right, those fears show up.
Yeah. So in the beginning, it is very clunky. This is not a snap your finger and like, oh, we're incoherent. Like it's not, because this part of you that has produced results the way that you've produced results is effective. Yeah. I mean, highly effective. It's like a super highway to get to this place.
Yeah.
This other thing comes online, and the way I describe it, it's like a donkey ride up one of those like mountain roads.
In Santorini in Greece, I took a donkey up the side of the mountain.
With crap everywhere. And it's like, it's
terrified you're going to fall off to your death.
It's so slow. And the mind keeps looking at it. It's like, what are you doing? Why are we wasting our time? We could have been there already.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, it's very clunky. However, having gone through that process, this is what I've noticed. There is a level of peace and effortlessness that starts to take hold of your life, where it's really scary to let go of the steering wheel.
Yes.
And trust that life is going to take you
right
to where you're supposed to be.
Somewhere to step on.
You go, no, we're not supposed to be there. And you turn the steering wheel. But every time you turn the steering wheel, like life has a funny way of always bringing us back. Yes. Sometimes cute, sometimes violent, but somehow it like has this ability to redirect. So what I've noticed recently is, first of all, I work way less than I ever have before.
Wow.
I make more money than I ever have before. My relationship.
What's your sense of how that happens? Like what's the equation there?
So as you stop the doing, right? So like when the doer is active all the time, the receiver part of us can't be active.
Yes.
So one of my coaches said, like, you have to stop to make money.
Yeah.
And I remember she said that to me. I was like, what the fuck do you mean? It's like, you have to stop to make money. Meaning like, if you're running full speed ahead all the time, something's trying to catch up to you, but you're there now. It doesn't even have time. So what I found is, as I've done more of these practices, these ideas and insights and opportunities just show up
to you.
And then instead of acting on 10 things that my mind told me we should do this or this and this and this and this and this and this, now I just wait and it's like, do this. And I do this. And the results are like 100x of what doing those 10 things are.
Yes.
People say, right, like 20% of the things you do will create 80% of the results.
Yep.
Yeah. If you're working from the mind, but if you're working from this balance, like you do one thing and it creates 1,000% of the results.
Well, I think it's like, my sense of it is that 20%, right, comes from the deeper place. So we're doing 80% of frantic doing, and then that 20% is actually more in the zone, as some people would call it, or in that divine guided place. Absolutely. Right. So once you put your energy there into that 20%, I mean, wow.
Yeah. And I just want to say one little caveat, because some people might be listening to this and going like, then your life is all perfect. No, listen, like I'm married. Great. I'm going to celebrate 13 years. I have 2 kids, 9.5 and 8. I'm having a life experience.
So it's not rainbows and butterflies.
No, that's the thing that I think is really important to understand.
No, I feel really grateful that you're saying that.
And here's the beauty. Like you get to this place that there's so much trust and acceptance for everything that shows up in your life.
Yes.
And the reason we fight or are tired or all that, because we resist the thing that is arising.
Here, right now.
Right here, right now. It's like my relation, she shouldn't be doing this, or he shouldn't be doing that, or my kid shouldn't be doing this, or I should have that. Every piece of that argument with reality is what's actually keeping that reality in place.
Yes.
Energy has a flow to it. Nothing is forever. It doesn't rain forever. It doesn't snow forever. You're not sad forever. You're not angry. Right? So it's like
exactly.
Everything wants to flow. So
yeah.
when it's flowing and then you hold it and you go, I shouldn't feel this. Now you've locked that in.
Yes.
Being in this
and
place.
It stays stuck there.
That's it.
Then you're kind of floating in that gray, heavy, intense.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then real simple, so this is what happens, right? This stuff is trying to exit. Yes. I said this the other day on a call, everything you want is already coming there at you. It's like this conduit that brings all this stuff to you, but it's blocked by all of these stuffed things that you're in an argument with. Mm-hmm. And as we begin
in yourself often.
That's it.
Yes.
As we begin to remove these things, and there's energetic processes, and we take people through meditations and experientially, not just having to understand, but experientially releasing these things. Yeah. All of this stuff that you have worked so hard to receive is already right in front of you.
Yeah.
But you move this stuff and it just starts to flow in.
Yes.
So I just find now it's just it's not always rainbows and butterflies. And what shows up, I know is here happening
to support you for your growth.
For me.
Right. That's it's really different, when you have a fight or you have a conflict, to hold it as, what is this showing me? How is this, an opportunity for my growth or to be in greater service to the world versus, yes. Oh shit, this sucks. I hate it. I need to fix this or get over it.
Yeah.
Can you give us a concrete example of your romantic relationship with your wife? What does this look like now versus what it might have looked like before?
That's such a good question. So right as you said that, I had this vision. So I'm going to share with you guys a story that I don't really share that much anymore. And I feel like it was one of those pivotal moments where I actually learned this valuable lesson. So when I was 30, so in 2004, I started a business. We were in commercial real estate and basically went from commission job to being the VP. We grew the company from $500,000 to over $100 million in that time. And then in 2010, I lost everything. I mean, everything.
Wow.
Because I just kept reinvesting in the company to try to make it float. Again, I can't let this go. I can't, right? That whole resistance piece. Mm-hmm. So life savings back into the company. We'll just survive another year. All this money is, I had millions of dollars in investments that if we just made it through all that, right? That the minds can tell me. And I got to a point where I wasn't bringing in any money and I was leaking money. And we had a mortgage to pay and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, I have a choice. I can either pay our mortgage or I can put food on our table.
Wow.
But I can't do both. And so I chose not to pay the mortgage, thinking in a month, it'll be okay. And we'll bounce back, et cetera. Yeah. Now, that's okay on its own. Mm-hmm. The bad part is I didn't tell my wife.
Ooh.
I didn't consult her. I didn't ask her because I had shame. And guilt around I'm supposed to be the provider. Yeah. I'm the rock. I'm the man, right? Men back in the day, we used to go out, we used to hunt. That was the thing. Today it's money, right? We're hunting money as this support structure. Yeah. So now the fact of admitting to my wife that I can't do that anymore, meanwhile, she's pregnant with our first child.
Wow.
Was I can't do it. So now month turns into 2, turns into 3, turns into 4. And now we're I don't see an end in sight and we're digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yes.
But now I have shame and guilt around having lied to my wife.
Right.
On top of all that other stuff. So I'm I just can't now.
Yeah.
So the universe, as I call it, a gift wrap kick in the nuts.
I was going to say a gift wrap slap in the head. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
A man rings our doorbell at 9:30 at night. And her grandparents happened to be there. And so I walk up to the door and I open the door. Are you Ilan Ferdman? And for whatever reason, stupidly, I said yes. And he goes, you've been served. Now my wife is standing right behind me and her grandparents are standing right behind her.
Wow.
So I close the door and I know that at some point I have to turn around
and go back in and face her.
To face them.
Yes.
and explain who the hell rang the doorbell at like 9:00 at night.
Yeah.
So I pull my wife into a side room. And at this point, I hadn't paid the mortgage for probably a year.
Wow.
And they served us with foreclosure papers. And it was this moment that I had to tell my wife what I did.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, that's it. Like, this is the end of our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never going to get to see my son. Like, she's never going to forgive me. It's over. And the wife, like, she's the most amazing woman.
Oh.
And I learned something really important on that specific day. When you say I do, basically what you're saying is like, all right, let's do this thing together.
Mm-hmm.
But what I didn't realize is it took that moment for me to create partnership with my wife, to be able to break down and know that I wasn't the one that had to keep it all together, that we got married so we could do this as partners, and I have a support.
Partners. Mm-hmm.
And aside from the fact that like, she obviously didn't like the fact that I lied, like it really bothered her that I didn't come to her.
Trust her. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized like the universe sent me, right? Like, not always rainbows, but it sent me a problem so big that all of my solving skills and performing skills and achievement skills could not solve this problem.
Yes.
I had to create that partnership in that marriage.
Yeah.
And like, look, I'll just wrap up the story for you. We're still living in the same house. After everything settled, like, we basically ended up not paying a mortgage for something like 2.5 years while I didn't have any money to pay and we were building a business. They redid my mortgage, eliminated $500,000 in penalties and principal, gave us a 2% interest rate for 40 years. Like, the stuff that I couldn't even imagine.
You never would have imagined that all of that would have been possible, because you were seeing, right, like the catastrophe, that it's all falling apart. She's gone. My kid is gone. The house is gone. Everything's gone. If I actually open up and tell the truth and get vulnerable.
That's it. And so now it was like, that moment was a big one for me, to like be able to be with my wife in that way, like super vulnerable and raw, and like deal with myself for the part of me that had a story or like a delusion that I had to be this way, that it was not okay to show up this way. And luckily for me, I was married to an amazing woman who could allow me to process that and hold me in that place. That was incredible. And then from there on out, it was like a matter of trusting that however this was unfolding was happening for us and leading us to whatever was next. And that's not to say that like you can hold that at all moments, right? Like I had the roller coaster ride of like, holy shit, we're going to be homeless and we have this kid on the way. And like, I had all of that. And I just kept practicing this process of trusting and releasing and trusting and releasing. And when this all worked out the way it did, and I told friends, they were like, that's impossible. Like, how did that happen? I was like, honestly, I don't know, because there is no formula. There's no process that I could have come up with to get to that result, because I wouldn't have believed that that result was possible. So I couldn't have even worked for it.
Right.
So
your mind could not have gotten you there without thinking that it's a possible outcome.
Impossible. Like that, it's unheard of, like, oh, here we'll deduct $500,000 from your mortgage and here's a 2% 40 year. Like, it's impossible. So that's when I started to play with this, like, oh my God, there's this whole other thing at play that when you stop resisting what is, and I would just go through the process, right? Like they would ask me for documentation, I would send it, someone new would come. And I just remember when it all ended, like we got a notice after trying to work with them for like 2.5 years, we got a notice and they were like, okay, if you can make this trial payment for the next 6 months, this will be your mortgage. And I'm not kidding you, Shayna, like that was the first month. That my brother and I had built our business to a point where I could actually take a salary home. Like if it would have happened a month earlier, I don't know that we'd have been able to make that happen.
It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story and how vulnerable it is. And I think it's one that men share, that sense of, oh God, if I'm not holding it all together, if I'm not the provider, then there's all this shame, as opposed to, okay, how do I do this as a team? How do I collaborate? How do I welcome all of these, right? Like you said, you can't always be in the mindset of this is for my higher good, or this is for my family's higher good. And at the same time, what I think you tell me is, right, the more you're allowing for those deeper places to come in, the more you can witness, oh, my mind is creating a tragedy or a catastrophe out of this. And actually, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I can't foretell the future. So which way do I want to hold this, right? And depending on which way we hold it, depends on then how we act and what actually shows up to meet us.
Can I give them a tool that was super helpful for me as I was going through this? So, I'm coming down to work, and in the back of my mind is this, like our minds is like the most creative Hollywood director ever.
Yeah.
And this was the vision I had. I'm not kidding you. Like, I had a vision. They're going to come kick us out of the house. And it was me, my wife in a box, like under a box in the rain, her holding the baby.
Oh my God.
With the sign that like homeless people, like, please help us. Like that was the vision. That my mind. So this is kind of like the future that my mind is like, oh my God, if we don't get this together, like this is what's going to happen. That is a debilitating in the moment experience to live inside of, because you're fighting something that is probably never happened, but in the moment you're greatly impacted by it. So I created this exercise for myself where it's like, what's the worst case scenario? So I wrote down my, worst case scenario vision.
Yes. We're in a box with the baby.
The whole thing. And I was like, whoa, and you can feel it. And there was just like sadness and heaviness and all of it. And then I was like, okay, remove all the dragons, remove all that stuff. Like, what's the actual worst case scenario? And the actual worst case scenario is my parents live 12 minutes up the road. We could easily you live in a room for a little bit with them.
Yep.
They would absolutely welcome us, and we'd take a pause button, figure stuff out and get back out there. And once I related to the real worst case scenario, it's this feeling of just like, you could like breathe. It was like someone like took me out of the depth of just drowning. And I was like, that's not bad.
Right.
Like, that's okay.
We could handle that.
Absolutely. Like, there'd even be great things about that. And so I remember that being so profound for me, because it removed a lot of that, like, I'm going to die feeling.
Yes.
And then I could just operate.
It's amazing. I really appreciate that. I think about that sometimes, being divorced and having a child who's 9. When we go on family vacations with my parents, my sister and her family, there's, her husband and 3 kids, they all stay in whatever their own room together, separate rooms. I've been staying like in a little, what do you call that? Like those rooms that have connecting rooms, like with me and my kid and my parents who are in their 70s. And there are experiences that we have together that we never would have had if I was in some other situation. And, that happens again and again. And I really do believe that mindset of everything can be turned into a gift or an opportunity. And the less grip we have on what this means about me if this were to happen, the freer we become and the more creative we are. And
absolutely.
Just love it. It sounds like you and your wife, I'm imagining, have a much more collaborative and honest way of relating now.
Yeah. And again, I think 2 things I will say are the biggest growth opportunities: intimate relationships and being a parent. I think are the 2 most, like, those people can push buttons you didn't even know you had in ways that you didn't even know they could be pushed.
Yes.
And now, so a lot of the work I do now is like, it's more in the felt sense. So instead of having to operate from the mind, it's like if I was dealing with that situation that I dealt with before, I didn't have these tools then, but if I was dealing with it now, I would actually bring myself in a comfortable, safe space. I would bring myself to that place. Like I would actually envision this loss of money and not being able to this and that. And I would just
start with the sensations and the feelings.
I would start to feel inside, like, what's arising.
Yeah.
Right. And if even as I talk about it now, like I can still see that there's certain parts that get activated, but so there's like sadness in my heart. You can kind of feel like this like little pinching in my heart. And there's this kind of swirl that's happening in my solar plexus right now.
Yep.
That is all about like, it's kind of like the way it's registering for me. It's like I'm not good enough. I can't, I'm not there for them, et cetera. So what I would do today is I just have practices where I just allow that part to be seen and received and heard and accepted. The way I envision it or explain to people, it's like if your 4-year-old son or daughter came to you and they were like, Dad, I'm the worst. I never get anything right. Nobody likes me. You wouldn't be like, well, work fucking harder.
Right. Or
you wouldn't be like,
up. You're fine. Don't talk like that.
Exactly. You just wouldn't. I mean, maybe some parents would. I could not see myself doing that. Right. So, there would be this softness that comes about where you would just get down on a knee and like embrace and love and maybe not try to fix, but just hold them in that place. And so now I've learned to do that internally for myself.
Beautiful. And
hold these parts that don't feel enough or feel sad and allow them to feel sad, right? So no longer sadness, resist, push down. Like I don't do that anymore. And as you experience what happens is, and this happens in like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, this is not like a long process. Yeah. The sensation just disintegrates. It's like you just feel either it goes down, it goes up, it just moves out. And in lieu of that, now you have all this incredible flow.
Yes.
And with that flow and energy comes new information that when you're holding this stuff so tight and trying to figure it out through your mind, you have no access to. Yes. So in the release, this new information comes through and this new information can guide you. It'll be like, oh, I didn't think about talking to that person. Like this person will come into mind and be like, call them. And you're like, okay. And then you call them and they're like, this and this and this and this and this. And it's just.
Thank you again, thank you for modeling too, that process that I actually take a lot of my clients through is like, okay, slowing down and actually letting yourself feel it, not trying to get rid of it. One of my teachers I love, she says, oh, sweetheart. It's like talking to those parts in ourselves. Oh, sweetheart, of course you're crying, or of course you're sad, or of course you're angry, or yes. Well, thank you so much for all of this. I always feel like, it's a drop in the bucket of what you have to offer. And for now, we can do this again. Is there anything you want to leave men with around this idea of the divine masculine, the process that you've gone through, the freedom, the trust?
Yeah. So we have an amazing Facebook group and an amazing resources. So like one of the things that I would highly recommend if you resonate with this conversation at all, and you want to learn a little bit more about like the how-to. So we have a series of meditations that we make available. We have a series of a bunch of free trainings that kind of dive into these aspects. And we do live calls and trainings in this Facebook group called Old Souls and Seekers. So if you go to joinoldsouls.com, just all one word, joinoldsouls.com, you can gain access to that group. And inside we have coaches and support people that will literally, like, you can contact them and have conversations, be like, hey, I'm looking for this meditation, and they'll guide you.
Beautiful.
I highly, highly, highly recommend doing these meditations because it will help you start a practice of healing these things instead of just dealing with these things. And it will change every relationship that you have with others, and more importantly, with yourself. Because I find with men, the one thing is we are so hard on ourselves. Like that thing with the 4-year-old boy, if you think about the way you actually talk to your 4-year-old boy inside, it's like, work harder. Are you kidding me? How did you not do? Like, if you stood over your 4-year-old son or daughter and you just yelled at them all day,
they just crumble.
And they still perform for you. Like, get that. Like, you are that way with them.
Yeah.
And they still perform for you. So now imagine if you actually loved and supported them and gave them acceptance, what they could be capable of is just, it's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for going through this journey and for, the risk that it takes to lose it all, to come, I don't even want to say clean. That doesn't feel the right word, because it's like none of it's dirty, right? I think that's the whole point of it, is none of it's dirty. None of it's actually shameful. And to be an example for men of being able to bridge those receptive and slower and softer parts and the parts that are harder and get it done. And, to show up and show that in a world where that's not always welcome feels like it takes a lot of courage. So thank you so much for doing it and for being with us.
Thank you. And just one little thing, I just want to make sure that people don't hear it as one is right and one is wrong.
Yes.
They are both so perfect. And this work is about integrating everything into the whole, not making this right and this wrong and getting rid of this and adding this. It really is just about the integration. So I just want to make sure that was clear.
Thank you. Awesome. I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.